Good evening. It's great to see everyone this evening. We do have a few announcements here. Get through those as quickly as we can. Need a couple more helpers with our cards tonight. If I can get some fellows to help with that. Just a reminder about the Family Devo that will be Saturday, hosted by the Monroes at their home. It'll be Saturday starting about 5 o'clock. Also, let's keep in mind that 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be having our Thanksgiving service, and we're aligning that up, and it's going to be a great service with some devotionals and songs to go along with that. So we're looking forward to that. I want to remind everyone about the Veterans Program tomorrow at Greenfield School. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, it'll be in the gym, and I know our veterans in the area would much appreciate it if you're able to come and support that. The October financial reports are in the bins at the exits if you'd like to pick up one of those tonight. And regarding our prayers, please remember Braxton Wicker in your prayers. Braxton is a first grade student of Amber Lowry's, and he's recently been diagnosed with leukemia. So please remember Braxton Wicker. And also, as we mentioned Sunday, please continue to remember Dawson Young in your prayers. And he's continuing to hang on and showing some signs of improvement each day, but still has a little ways to go. So please continue to pray for him, and hopefully he'll continue to show some signs of improvement each day. So please remember Braxton Wicker and Dawson Young, along with the others that we have listed in our bulletin this week. Tonight our opening prayer will be led by Kenneth Monroe. Sam Sims will lead us in our singing, and Keith Jones will lead us in our closing prayer. All right, guys, y'all go ahead and pick up the cards. I think that's all of our announcements, so we'll enter into our worship. You pray with me. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we come thanking Thee for this opportunity that we have to come here together and worship Thee tonight. We ask Thee to be with us as we open our hearts and our minds, that we might take Thee in, that Thou might go with us and guide us through our life and down through our journey towards heaven. We ask Thee tonight to be the two young men that's been mentioned. Help them and guide them and give them comfort and strength, and help them that they might overcome the problems that they have and be back to their normal places in life, if it be Thy will. Ask Thee to be with the rest of the people that is in need of Thy care and Thy blessings. Bless them, help them in some kind way, that they might be restored to their wanted places in life. We ask Thee to be with the ones that are grieved over the loss of loved ones, all the ones in our community round about. Be with their families and give them comfort and strengthen them as they go through their time of dismay. We ask Thee to be with Brother Brent as he works here with us. Guide him and ever keep him in Thy hand, that all things that he does in his army with Thy will, and much good can come from his efforts that he puts forth. Ask Thee to be with Brother Eli as he works with the young people. Help him to understand the blessings that he is bestowing on these young people, that their minds are young and they're taking in so much that their learning will be towards Thee. We ask Thee to be with all the elders and the deacons and all the ones that are in charge of the church and the duties of the church. We ask Thee to be with them and they look to Thee and guide them, that all things they do is in harmony with Thy teaching. We ask Thee to be with us as we go through our lives. Help us that we are able to show someone else that Jesus is living in us, and much good can come from it, and others be brought to me. We thank thee for all the many blessings we enjoy, the sunshine, the rain, all elements we have here on this earth. Help us ever remember that all these come from thee. We thank thee for the Bible, the plan of salvation, and our hope of eternity after death. Ask thee for guidance as we go into the further exercise of this service. Be with the teachers, bless them and help them that they might touch someone's heart. Forgive us when we fail, and all things thy will be done. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Number 220. Let's sing. "'Tis the grandest thing for the ages run, 'tis the grandest thing for a mortal tongue, 'tis the grandest thing to the world their song. Our God is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. Go by sin oppressed, go to him for rest. Our God is able to deliver thee. 'Tis the grandest thing in the earth for man, 'tis the grandest thing for a mortal strength, 'tis the grandest thing, tell the world again. Our God is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. Though by sin oppressed, go to him for rest. Our God is able to deliver thee. 'Tis the grandest thing, let the tidings roll to the guilty heart, to the sinful soul. Look to God in faith, he will make thee whole. Our God is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. Though by sin oppressed, go to him for rest. Our God is able to deliver thee. 223. How sweet, how heavenly is the sight when those that love the Lord in one another's peace delight, and so fulfill the word. When each can feel his brother
Well, hello. Here we are for our Wednesday night class, and that sure seems awful close. Is that loud enough? Y'all hear that okay? You would think having 2 weeks to get ready for this lesson, since I thought they may have paved or sealed, I guess, the driveway or the parking lot, because they knew it was my week to teach. So that delayed me a week, so I thought I'd just be more ready. I don't think more ready is right. But anyway, I'll be more prepared to teach this class, but that's not the case. I just keep pushing it back. But anyway, we're here and we're going to attempt to have this lesson tonight. And I know we're all accustomed to PowerPoint. So here's my PowerPoint for the night. I have a diagram of the football field because, as you know, this is the theme that we've sort of taken, using the analogy of a football game to kind of help prepare for our lessons. And 2 weeks ago, Clint had our lesson, and he kind of got us in that hurdle of putting us down to the 30-yard line. We started, if you remember, on our own goal line. And that's what my PowerPoint represents. It's a diagram of a football field. I got 100 yards laid out. You can see my little goalpost on each end. And then I said right here, we started from our own goal line. And then as we progressed 10 yards at a time, that was our goal. And that can be our goal in this game of life that we're playing. Just to achieve 10 yards at a time, because when you're going forward, you're not going backwards, right? So that has got us now at the 30, and tonight's lesson, Lord willing, tonight's lesson is going to put us down to the 20, and when you get to the 20, you're in the red zone. You're in a scoring position. Whether we kick a field goal, that's not going to be the case. Or whether we truly score, and that's our goal. That's what we want to accomplish. So as we got to this point, and as we are familiar with this game of life, and using this analogy of football to kind of help us put it in perspective, what we've actually accomplished over the last roughly 9 lessons is that I hope I can speak for all the guys that stood up here. I don't mean to put words in anybody's mouth, but I certainly do think that it has been our hope, our prayer, that we have shown commitment through our fellowship with each other, through studying the Bible, enhancing our prayer life, becoming a more disciplined Christian, hopefully, to become a much more person of character in our service. Now, as I've said all that, I tried to identify every topic that we have discussed so far in moving us 10 yards ahead. Commitment, fellowship, a life of discipline, a life of character. Those are our lessons, or what we've studied so far. Before I left to come to Bible study, Tennessee Vol women were playing basketball. Probably some of you may have been watching that game too. I don't have sense enough to hit the pause button and watch it later or record it. That's beyond me, so I've gotten past that. I'll just catch up with it on something, ESPN or whatever, later. But anyway, I don't know about every locker room, but I know that Tennessee Vols football locker room, at the door where you walk out and where you walk in, there is a sign above that door. And probably many of you have seen that sign probably at some point via TV or whatever the case may be, social media, whatever the case may be. That sign is in the shape of our great state of Tennessee. It's naturally painted orange. And the wording on that sign says, "I will give my all for Tennessee today. That's what it said. And keeping that in mind, what we're willing to commit to, what we're willing to give, is going to it's going to be our theme for tonight's lesson. But before we actually get into that, I want to share since we're talking about this game of life and using football as an analogy, I'm going to talk about, just for a brief minute, one of my all-time football heroes I had growing up. And this person was, to me, he was extremely unique. And I hope you'll get a little bit what I'm talking about as we go through this. But in 1975, that's a long time ago. I blink and it seems like last night. I wonder where the time's gone. But 1975, this individual was drafted by the Chicago Bears. 2 years later, 1977, he was selected as the MVP of the NFL. He was selected 9 times to the Pro Bowl, and he retired after 13 years with 16,736 rushing yards. And he had a slogan. He had a quote. And his quote was, he says, "I want to be remembered by what I gave on the field." I would ask if you'd know who that is, but I'm going to tell you who it is. But I want to be remembered as the guy who gave his all. Just like these players at the University of Tennessee put their hand on that sign and says, "I'm going to give my all for Tennessee today." That was who this person was. I wanted to give my all when I played. When I was on the field, I wanted to leave it all out there. The key to this is this word called give. And anyway, his wife actually established a foundation in his honor because at a young age, after 13 years in the NFL, but at a young age of 45, he passed away of cancer. And when his wife established this foundation in his honor, this nonprofit was a benefit to needy kids for the purposes of food, clothing, and shelter. That was a legacy that meant more to him than 16,736 rushing yards, 13 years in the league, or being 9-time named to the Pro Bowl, or being an MVP 2 years after his draft. It was important to him to give back to those who were more in need than he was. Walter Payton is who I'm talking about. And even today, the NFL awards the Walter Payton Award to a recipient every year for guys who give back to their community. And based on what they do is how this award is actually provided or given to an NFL player every year. I think that's remarkable for a person to want to have such a giving legacy as Walter Payton does. The awards that we sometimes get in our head, I think sometimes they're most important to us based on some monetary factor. And that's really just not the case. I'm going to get into that just a little bit in a second. But as we think about what our lesson is tonight, and I'm certainly not going to speak for the elders, but I do think our elders are so appreciative of the acts of this congregation. I really do believe that. And I believe they express that time in, time out. Because our lesson tonight is on giving. And I've been accused, because I try to get these Wednesday night classes structured somewhat, about assigning certain people to certain lessons. Trust me, I don't do that. If I did, I would assign myself the easiest lesson, and tonight is by far the easiest lesson for me to get up here and talk about. Giving is an act that we're going to get into book, chapter, and verse here in just a few minutes. But as I mentioned earlier about our eldership being extremely appreciative of this congregation, and I know we should take some pride in that, and how we conduct ourselves and how we give of our means. But at the same time, even though our elders may be approving or appreciative, that's really not what matters. What matters is how God feels about our giving, how God looks at our giving. And that's what we're going to drive down into tonight. Let me just be the first to say, this is not a lesson that is, I hope, threatening to anyone in any way. But what I do hope is that we are able to take some things that we bring out in this lesson and do nothing but challenge ourselves. Because I think that's what God expects of us, is to challenge ourselves. And here's where we're going to head with that. Man, these verses, you guys can quote them. You don't have to turn there, but I'm going to ask you to go ahead and turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 9. And we're going to look at bits and pieces of these verses. Not to take them out of context by any means, but there's certain things within these verses that I think, for me, hit home much closer to home than what. And as we stand here, the one who does stand here gets the most out of it. Let me just be the first to say that. I'm getting a ton more out of this than I know you will. But parts of these verses really resonated with me, maybe in a completely different light than they had in the past. But if you look at verse 7 of 2 Corinthians chapter 9, this verse that I want to focus on basically says, "So let each one give as he purposes in his heart." And you know, I've read that verse time and time and time again. But I never really thought about this as he purposes in his heart. I've just never really given that a lot of thought. Shame on me, but I haven't. And what has challenged me in this preparing for this lesson is how there was two questions that the author brought out to light that I'd never really given any thought about. But when you think about let each one of us give as we purpose in our heart, one of the questions is do we give as an afterthought? I want you to think about that just a minute. Here's the other question that got brought out that I have actually thought about. Do we give out of guilt? Now, this lesson is a lesson to challenge us. I don't think anybody, certainly me, would not stand here and say we're not giving enough. That is not the case, okay? Please understand that. But our attitude toward giving is where this whole theme of tonight's lesson really needs to boil down to. It's what it needs to boil down to. Our attitude toward giving. And sometimes the question that I ask myself, do we give as an afterthought? The first thing that I guess I'm telling off on myself in tonight's lesson, but I don't care. Because I think it's helped me. The question that I really pondered with is, do I give enough or only enough to where it doesn't strain my banking account at that time? And that's when I started maybe personally feeling somewhat guilty just examining myself. Not that I'm giving out of guilt, but am I guilty of what I give? Do I feel guilty of what I give? That was my challenge. All of this has been my challenge, and that's what you'll hear me say throughout this lesson. But at the same time, when I thought about giving out of guilt, or am I giving out of guilt, I started asking myself, I feel obligated to do something each week. I feel that obligation. And where I'm headed with this is that have I given enough? Have I given too little? Am I giving just what's adequate based on the position of my finances at that time? Those are my questions. But it's not just limited to finances. Our giving needs to be giving of our time, our talent. It's much more than just a dollar amount. It's a tremendous amount more than just a dollar amount. And as I just referenced these lessons that's led up to tonight, when you think about our commitment to what we are representing Christ, when we think about the fellowship that not only we associate with each other, but those that we associate with Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, those that we are with on a very regular basis that are not inside this building, our fellowship with them, how are we representing ourselves in front of those that we don't see here Sunday and Wednesdays? When we think about the discipline we have and we possess and how that's reflected, and we think about, are we prideful in that we are servants of God? Do we want that expressed to those that we're around every day? Or are we a touch ashamed? This giving is much more than finances. Giving is considered a part of who we are as a Christian and our commitment in being a Christian. You know, when we think about our giving, we have to understand that it's a decision. It's not a reaction. There's a big contrast there. When we decide to do something, we plan it. We give it thought. But when we just do it on the whim, we do it sometimes just by reacting to whatever the matter might be at the time. You know, I think God expects us to plan. God planned. It was simple for Him to plan. But He's the master planner. And as He planned, I think He has expectation that we plan. As we are required to give as we purpose in our heart, I certainly think it means that we plan what we give. That is our purpose. So, if you think about Proverbs chapter 3 and verses 9 and 10, honor the Lord with your possessions and the first fruits of all your increases, so your barns may be filled with plenty and your vats overflow with new wine. Our attitude should be that we always give as we purpose. Our attitude should be is that we give just like we plan. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 2. Let's look at that one right quick. We're going to come back to verse 7 here in a second, but let's skip down, or let's flip over to 1 Corinthians 16, verse 2. let each one of you lay something aside, storing up as he prospers. You know, I used to think, and I told you I was going to tell off on myself, but I would get confused with when you compared verse 7 to verse 2. Purposes or prospers. I always thought they was one the same, but you know they're not. In my opinion, they're not. I'm going to purpose means I'm going to plan, but I'm going to plan based off how I have prospered. The giving is an expression of gratitude to God. Whether it be financially or whether it be of your time and talent. That's what our giving is. And that's how I think God looks at us in our giving. You know, you see, our giving could be measured against God's blessing. Here's what I mean by that. The more blessed we feel, the more bountiful we should give. I am 59 years old. And I didn't think I'd ever... You don't really think about how old you are. But, you know, hey, that's almost as old as dirt. We've been around a long time. And I can look out across most of this auditorium, and I see aged from where I am, older, and a little bit younger. A lot younger. But as we think about these blessings that we have enjoyed up until this point in time, do we sometimes take that for granted? I don't know about we, but I know I do. I have. And I feel guilty about that. And I feel like sometimes that when things are smooth sailing, you know, is when we take this game of life mostly for granted. But when we have adversities, then we tend to want to become extremely close to God. It's a shame that it takes an adversity for that to happen. And I'm not saying that's the case for everybody. But I think it is for some. I know it is for me. And when we think about how God's expectation of us, or that He has of us, in how we give back, I think that if we considered the blessings we have and who those blessings come from, what we work for on this place we call home is nothing compared to what we hope to be working toward, is that heavenly home. And if I ask you today, would you trade everything you had, every possession you own, knowing you could immediately have an inherited home in heaven, would you do it? I am not going to ask you to answer that, but I would. But yet, do I give the same way or equally as to how I'm blessed? My point is, we can never give the blessings that God... We can never return everything back to God that He's given us. I don't want to make it sound like we could. We couldn't do that. But in our heart, we should feel like we are doing that. And that's the attitude that I think it's most important for us to try to be sure we are understanding, is the attitude in how we give and in what we give ourselves to. So, our giving is an expression of God's blessings. Over in Luke chapter 19, there's a story that we learned from we little people. And hopefully you'll understand where I'm headed with that in just a few minutes. But in this story in Luke chapter 19, over around verse 6, 7, and 8, 9, those verses, Jesus is in Jericho. He's going through Jericho. And there is this wee little man. That's the song we learned how to know who Zacchaeus was. He was that wee little man, and he knew Jesus was in Jericho. He was so adamant about just seeing Jesus that what did he do? He went and climbed up into a... And I think it's so odd that the Bible specifies the kind of tree he climbed. He went and climbed a sycamore tree. I have no idea why that would be important, but evidently it was, because they specified the kind of tree he climbed. He was so adamant about seeing Jesus that and because he was so short, he went, got ahead of him, climbed a tree just so he could visually see him as he passed by. So you know the story. When Jesus gets there, he looks up, he sees him. Zacchaeus, come down from there. I'm going to your house. And immediately went. Verse 8. Look at verse 8. Luke chapter 19. Look at verse 8. Now, when the people saw Jesus and heard him say he was going with Zacchaeus, because Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector, that was his responsibility. He was also extremely wealthy. And by virtue of those two things, they thought he was a sinner. Now, he was a sinner, but not because of what he did, and not because of what he had. He was a sinner because we're all sinners. The people said that, well, Jesus, you're going to the home of a sinner. Here's what I think is kind of unique in verse 8. I have no idea what they talked about when Zacchaeus come down out of that sycamore tree. He and Jesus walked to Zacchaeus' house. I have no idea what that conversation was. I have no idea what that conversation was when they got in the door. But here's what we do know. Because in verse 8, Zacchaeus said to him, says, "Look, Lord." I thought that was kind of an odd way to be addressing Jesus. But he said, "Look, Lord." He said, if I give back half of everything I possess. And if I have falsely been accused of taking something that I shouldn't from somebody, I return it fourfold. I thought, you know what? They were having a conversation about giving. If they hadn't had that conversation and Zacchaeus trying to defend, I'm not a sinner because of what I do for a living, there was a conversation going on about what Zacchaeus does for others and for the Lord. Because verse 9 validates to me why that's true. Because Jesus replied to him right then and there, and he said, salvation is in this house. I don't know how many of you, if I said tonight that in 40 minutes Jesus is going to pass by Highway 45. And if that were out, there would be such a mass of people on both sides of that road, you couldn't shake them with a stick. It would be worse than 100,000 people sitting around the Neyland football stadium. It would be people everywhere. I have seen Brother Raymond take the tallest ladder that I've believe you could ever buy, put up in that top part of that part of the outside to change light bulbs out there. And I thought, not a big deal seeing him up there, but if you ever start up that ladder, it becomes a big deal. But I would climb that ladder if I knew I could see Jesus pass by that road right there. And you would too. Because I think that's the love we have for Him. And that's the love He expects us to have for Him. And if we did, and Jesus saw us standing on that ladder, and He said, Andy, I want you to come down off that ladder because I'm going to go to your house. We're going to jump in my car, we're going to ride to my house. And we're going to talk about something on the way over there. I don't know. I don't know how I would communicate with Jesus about what I give. If He asked me, Andy, how much do you give? I don't know that His reply to me would be, salvation is in this house. You see the importance of giving? Not just monetarily. It's giving whether we're writing a card, whether we're presenting a meal. You know what I'm talking about. You all do it. The challenge we have in our hearts is the attitude in which we do it. That state of Tennessee sign, are we giving our all? That is our challenge. That is the question we need to be asking ourselves. We should give back as we prosper. That should be our attitude. Now flip back to verse 7. 2 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 7. God loves a cheerful giver. You know, cheerful giving is a measure of faith and love. Those who believe in heaven are more eager to give. Those who care about people take pleasure in giving. As we purpose and as we prosper, are we committed to what we should give, or do we find ourselves sometimes missing out on whether we're giving for true joy or heavenly joy versus earthly joy? Is it a decision or is it a reaction? Do we sometimes plan our giving or determine our giving after the house payment, the car payment, the credit card payment, the clothes bill, the gas bill, the electric bill, the food bill, the new pair of tennis shoes? Do we sometimes find ourselves wanting to give after everything else is satisfied? I don't think that's the case, but that's the challenge that we need to have with ourselves. You know, the Old Testament sort of set a standard for giving. And we all know what that is. 10%. I don't know what it'd be like to live in the Old Testament days. I have no idea. I know they didn't go home to a nice, cooled, or heated environment. I know they didn't kick their feet up and watch ESPN on TV. I know they didn't have a luxury of hitting a button and cooking something right there. My point is, we have it so good today. We have it better than anyone can fathom. But yet, is 10% of something where we set our standard? Is that our benchmark? That's a question we need to ask ourselves. You know, here's one thing. Over in Acts chapter 5, Ananias and Sapphira, they weren't punished by what they gave. They were punished because they were deceptive. They were punished because they were really trying to buy a reputation. Their attitude was all wrong. When you think about Luke chapter 21, and I'm trying to hurry through this a little bit, but you think about Luke chapter 21, where the parable of the woman who gave 2 mites, when all the rich was putting in their contributions, she gave 2 mites. And what did God say? She gave more than the rich. And then when you think about on down in Luke 18, or back in Luke 18 with the rich young ruler, he asked God, he asked Christ, I have done all these things just right. I have lived just right. What do I need to do to inherit the kingdom of heaven? And he told him, sell all you have, give it to the poor, come follow me. What did he do? Not that. It's attitude. It's heart. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15, 17 says, do not love the world or the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. But all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. We never know, but I do know this. Our attitude needs to be, God loves a cheerful giver. Winding this down, here's what really resonated with me. Let me see. I'm having to skip over just a little bit, but if you look back in 2 Corinthians 9, you're in verse 7. If you look up verse 6, he who sows bountifully reaps bountifully. We all knew what that verse says. We'll give faithfully on the first day of the week. Back in that second verse of 2 Corinthians 16. Here's what makes me challenge me. That word bountifully. I'm not going to read you those definitions because we're out of time. But go home and look that word up. Look that word up. Because if that word alone does not challenge us, there's not another word that will. So when we give our all for Tennessee today, when our game is over, not this game of life, when our game is over, are we going to tell ourselves we gave our all? That's what we need to be asking ourselves. That's the challenge for us. Are we giving our all? Is that going to be our legacy when it's over here? Well, I hope y'all enjoyed my PowerPoint. That's all I've got.
442, sorry, invitation song. 442. News reporter Scott Pelley goes out on some very exotic assignments to far places of the world, remote places of the world, sometimes dangerous places of the world, to get the story that nobody else is courageous enough or foolish enough to get, depending on how you look at it. And he says that he has learned there's some things that are just absolutely essential to travel with. He has a shortwave radio, he has a camera, an indestructible suitcase, his laptop computer, his phone, and his most important piece of equipment that he takes with him is an emergency locator beacon. It's a special device where you extend the antenna and you push the buttons, and it will send a signal to a satellite that's connected to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And when that signal is sent, it will tell the officials who he is and give them his precise location. Now, he says, depending on which country you're in, they might send a rescue squad or they may not. That just kind of depends on the country where you are. But Pelley says he has learned that he will never travel without that piece of equipment. Well, look at Psalm 139, beginning in verse 1. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Verse 9. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light unto me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. This journalist sees the need of having this special device that in a time of danger and a time of need can tell someone else who he is and where he is and what he needs. Fortunately for us as children of God, we don't need any device like that, do we? When we get in the roughest and toughest places in our lives, always rest assured that the Lord knows who we are, where we are, and exactly what we need. I hope that gives us courage and confidence, no matter what the situations are in which we may find ourselves. As we come to a close here tonight, you look at yourself and your relationship with the Lord, and you see any distance there, you see anything that needs to be addressed, we're here for you. We sing this song, give you an opportunity to come and let us help you in whatever your need is tonight. So whether you need to obey the gospel and you're ready to put on Christ in baptism, if you need our prayers tonight, we hope you'll come. Let us know how we can help. So if you need to come, why not come now as we stand and as we sing.
Lord. outstretched to face the judgment. Unprepared to meet thy God, to meet thy God. If you spurn the invitation till your life on earth is o'er, then you'll see your sad condition, unprepared to meet my God. Careless soul, oh, heed the warning, for your heart will soon be gone. Oh, destiny life will soon be gone. Oh, how sad to face the judgment. Oh, how sad to face the judgment. Unprepared to meet thy God, to meet
Want to make just a brief announcement regarding the security system here in the building. About a year and a half ago, we had the last phase